Well, hello there, and welcome to another edition of Johnny Davis Live. We have a real exciting show for you today. Exciting, serious, informative, and sincere. I'm excited to have our guest, as you see sitting there in the screen, Mr. Jim Koenig there. He's out of Merle's Inlet, South Carolina. He's a former corrections officer and a captain of that, and really has an interesting story. You can see his family there on the screen as well. Our goal today is we're going to talk about racism. I know it's a sensitive subject. I know that people, oh, don't talk about that. Why are you talking about that? Why are you bringing that up? Well, because it's real in our society. And as I say on Johnny Davis Live, it's real talk, real solutions. So it would be disingenuous of me to act like certain things were not going on in society and have somewhat of a platform and not talk about it. And Mr. Kearney, fortunately, sees it the same way. We also, by the way, Mr. Lance Adams, who was supposed to be on today, an emergency came up, so he's not able to come on. We are expecting a couple of other guests to chime in, though, as we move through the show. The show might go an hour, might be a little bit more. We have a lot to talk about, and we want to bring up a lot of subjects because I think it's going to be really interesting to, go ahead and get these things out right now and talk about them because I'm not going to have a show on this all the time, so we might as well go ahead now and kind of talk about. I want to thank our sponsors of Blackout Ice at blackoutice.com for all they do, and Eastern Offset Printing out of Atlantic Beach, North Carolina, for their support. This discussion today is really also about, again, helping people understand the importance of why people need to get along with each other, right? The importance of respect, the importance of love. But in order to do that, I think that, as I used to say all the time, education is the key to understanding. Education is the key to understanding. I think people are a little naive and they don't understand certain things, or they've been taught certain things and they live life just believing that without, expanding their thought process and all of that. And I think that that is one of the things I kind of want to go into today. So first, let me welcome my guest again, Mr. Kearney, and we're just going to jump right into it there, sir. How are you today?
Fine yourself, Johnny.
I'm doing just fine. Hey, if
Good.
you will take a moment just to kind of familiarize people about who you are, your background, how you were raised, etc.
Sure. I was born in New York, raised in New York. I went to an elementary school that I didn't know at the time what it was, but it was integrated. It was a busing program.
Mm,
When I was 10, we moved to a suburb it was white, predominantly white, completely.
mm,
Um, and I grew up that way. So one of the things that I wanted to discuss was ignorance, which I think which is turned into a bad term, something people don't want to accept, don't want to admit. So I'll touch back to that. So I lived in what I call my little white bubble, where there was just no education, not
right.
from not from the schools, not through no fault of anybody's necessarily,
Right.
just no education, no exposure, no
Exposure.
no exposure to other cultures.
Right.
Um, at 22 years old, I entered the New York City Department of Correction.
At
Uh,
22.
at 22,
Okay.
yes, fresh out of college. Again, the college I went to was not very diverse. So being thrust into that, where the majority of the uniform staff were Black and Spanish. Uh,
When
the
you say uniforms, you mean the people that were in the prison?
I mean the officers
Oh, the
and
officers.
yes.
Okay.
Now
Okay.
we also, I mean, it goes without saying that the prison population obviously was above 90% Black and Spanish as well.
which is a problem within itself.
Absolutely, that's an incarceration problem. We can touch on it at some point if you'd like.
Yes,
But
we will.
being at 22, coming from where I came from, uh, and being, in at first in a classroom at the academy, you have to make friends, and
Right.
I don't. I'm not saying it was a struggle. Like I felt it was difficult. It wasn't. I'm not. I didn't go through a struggle. There was no animosity that I felt, or that the people that I've remained friends with to this day felt. I guess you would liken it to, joining the military, enlisting. You become a brotherhood. All that other stuff is in the periphery. But I was open to learn, I guess, and just by becoming, listening, becoming friends, not consciously listening. I don't want to make it sound like I went there, hey, I'm going to learn about Black people. I'm going to learn about Spanish people. You just went and made friends. You were going to be stuck with people and work with people and depend on people. And you
So
didn't,
the socialization, what you're telling me, was a huge part. The fact that
right.
that's the job, but it just so happens that a majority of the people that worked there were of another race, right?
Absolutely.
Right, and
Yes.
you just kind of had to assimilate into that. Was there?
Ab-
You can you recall within yourself? I mean, talking
Yeah.
real talk.
Mhm.
Was there any kind of fear or resistance, perhaps, in that, knowing that you were kind of more the oddity?
Um, in myself, or did I? In myself, no. But I was a 22-year-old kid, and I say that in every sense of the word, kid. Um, and I would say that I felt. I mean, again, I hate using the term welcome, but there was no.
It's okay. Yeah.
There was no. I didn't feel animosity or any sense. I mean, and welcomed. I don't know the word to use, but there was no. I asked my friends yesterday. I said, race relation wise, do you think things have gotten better, worse, stayed the same over the past 25, 30 years? And I don't know how you feel, but they have resoundingly said much worse. Um, so, that 22 years ago when I entered the job, things I guess were different. So maybe, the people I were with were more accepting. I don't like grouping people. I think that's part of the problem is that when we start talking, there is obviously a culture, but at the same time, everybody's an individual. Everybody's an individual. So you have to look at both. You have to learn the culture. You have to learn and be accepting of the culture, uh,
Mhm.
and learn, but also understand that everybody has their own thought processes. Everybody has their own prejudices of all colors,
Mhm.
and you don't pigeonhole a whole race of people, a whole group of people, a whole
Right.
community of people. It goes back to the societal concept of tribalism. You don't look at a cross section of people and say, "Oh, everyone's like that."
Well, I'm not.
I learned that pretty quick, and then when I graduated the academy and went into actually entered the jail system,
Mhm.
Rikers Island is the biggest jail system in the country for sure. At one time, it was the planet.
Mhm.
Um, Obviously, with the jail population being what it was, you also had to learn how to communicate with people who were being detained against their will, who,
Mhm.
whether they were upstanding citizens in society or not, you had to make things work. And it's a little bit different than being on the street. You don't have weapons, you don't have firearms,
Mhm.
so they called it in the academy interpersonal communication skills. I think it's
Mhm.
nonsense. You have to know how to talk to people. You have to learn how
Right.
to talk to people, learn their language, but also be respectful of, also not lose yourself and
Right.
know your language as well.
I'm kind of curious about the
Yeah.
fact that you saw so many African American people that were locked up.
Yeah.
that were actually the population.
Hmm.
Did that give you some type of stigma about African American people at that time?
No.
In other words, that
Uh,
they were bad, they were criminals, they were, etc.
no, it didn't. And I don't know why that is. It could be because the people I counted on, the people I considered my brothers and sisters, um, looked just like the people who were incarcerated. So again, it was easy for me to see people as individuals
Hmm.
instead of seeing news clips on TV or watching TV. I think that's where the ignorance comes in. Is if you grew up like I did, not being exposed to other cultures or other people, or if you lived in an area where most people were like you,
Right.
regardless of color, if you want to go that far. You're not exposed to other people's plights, other people's cultures, other
Right.
people's, you know, and ignorance, which again is a bad. It's labeled a bad thing in this country. The ignorance means stupidity.
Mm.
No, ignorance means I don't know.
I just don't know.
And you and
Right.
I spoke about that. Like,
Right.
if something comes up, I'll tell you I don't know.
Right. Right. Right.
Oh,
Right.
give me a few minutes to think about it.
Right.
Sometimes people get in trouble by just feeling like they have to answer something before they actually gave it some thought. And
Right. Right.
that's where, the resistance of ignorance comes in. Where
I'm kind of interested in Mr. Kevin Bass here, someone, a martial artist who I know
okay.
he's on with us today. He made a comment. I was raised not to be prejudiced.
Hmm.
Uh, what do you think that means?
Um, I don't know what that's a. It's a good philosophy. It's a good statement. I don't know what that entails. I was raised not to be prejudiced too.
And that's what I'm asking. What does
Yeah.
that mean to you?
Um, well, by prejudice, see, is prejudice racism? Some people call it the same. I don't. Prejudging somebody is prejudging somebody. Uh, see, in the law enforcement community, in correction, when a person enters the jail system, you have to classify them: name, date, birth, weight, height,
Mm,
race.
mm,
Race is not ethnicity. Race is color. You're black, you're white Hispanic, you're black Hispanic. For better or worse, those are the classifications that New York
right.
State uses when you're put in. So prejudice, I could prejudge anybody. I could prejudge a white guy who comes in, a Spanish woman who comes in by mannerisms, by their eyes, if they're on. So prejudice and racism, they can be the same or they can be exclusive. Um, but I was raised the same way, not to be racist or prejudiced. But you can, depending on the situation,
Mm,
I I've questioned and I've asked people I've worked with, have I ever said or done anything that you might not have called me out on, but unknowing to me was offensive? And they've told me no, but they obviously don't remember every conversation that we've
right.
had. But I've given you some examples of things that I did not know were considered, or I didn't know the where these words were derived from.
Mm,
And once I was told, I gained a new perspective.
right. Right.
But where someone might use that and like, oh, you're racist. Well, no,
Right.
explain to me why, because I don't know. And unless you have somebody, or unless you're exposed to that culture and have the relationships in which you could ask those questions. Like
Mm,
we spoke about how some friends that I have identified their skin color a certain way, and I didn't know
right.
that was they call it as that's sort of like on the lower rungs of a racist
Right.
statement.
You
You
mentioned
know what
the
I mean?
fact that it
Right.
was about, you would say like they were like, so she was light skinned or
Light
something like
skin,
that.
but they used a different term. And I didn't know that, it wasn't until 12 years later
Yeah.
that that someone pointed out where that term came from and that it could be considered offensive. So I just struck it from my vocabulary.
Right, right, right,
But no one ever called. I don't even know if I ever used it
right,
when I was working with everybody. But if I did, they said they wouldn't have called me on it because they knew what my intent would have been.
right.
And a
Well,
lot has to do with intent.
right.
Um,
Yeah, a
well,
lot.
any open-minded person, I
Mm.
think, should take intent into consideration.
It's,
Not as
intent is really important. Jim, what I want to do as well, I see Dr. Andrea,
okay.
Dr. Hill Vuberg is here, and I want to go ahead and bring her up as well, get a little bit of perspective from her, just so that we can, hopefully she'll have a little time to hang out with us as well. Dr. Vuberg, how are you?
I'm good. Thanks, Johnny. How are
Good.
you?
Thanks for coming on today. I know it was kind of a short. We kind of spoke a little bit on yesterday and all, but it didn't give you a ton of time. That's Mr. Jim Kearney there
Hey,
Hello.
how are
on the
you?
screen there.
Good, thank you.
So happy to have you on today. I wanted to just have you. Are you going to be able to hang with us for pretty much the hour?
Yeah, I'm here. I don't have anything till 3.
Well, we got okay, great. I appreciate that because there's a lot of areas I want to go into. But first, if you would take a moment to introduce yourself a little bit and give us a little bit about your past and your history in regards to race, if you will,
In
because
regard to race. Yeah, well, I've known Johnny a long time because I work as a ringside doctor, and so he's worked a lot with me and knows a lot about my family
yeah.
history. I was raised by kind of hippie, change the world kind of parents. I always call them, so lots of degrees, doctor, PhDs. My dad, sometimes a minister, sometimes a professor, depending on how frustrated he got with what he was.
Right.
We moved around a lot. Technically, I'm from Northern Virginia, but kind of where it starts becoming the South, I guess. And I live in Atlanta, Georgia now. And most of my life, I've been raised in the South or outside the country. So I've never really lived anywhere up north. But my parents, uh, my whole life. It wasn't just that I was listening to what y'all were saying. It wasn't just that I was raised not to be prejudiced. It went beyond that because from a very young age, my parents pointed out racism to me when they saw it, and so it went beyond understanding other people to under they pointed out everybody. So for example, we moved to Birmingham, Alabama, and the KKK was taking up money as we got off the highway.
Wow.
That was my first. We in Virginia, while there was racism, it wasn't that evident, and we'd moved there from Guatemala, so like we'd been in a real
Wow.
tumultuous
Well,
war zone. And to me, the men in the white robes were more scary than like hearing about people being executed in Guatemala. They kind of seemed like ghosts to a little kid, and so from that point on, my parents really pointed out things. Uh, I would go to a black girl's birthday party in Birmingham, and I would come out of McDonald's, and my parents would say, "Were you the only white kid there?" And I'm like, "Oh."
you had
Yeah,
to
I
think about it.
was. I didn't think about that while I was there. So it went beyond like they were pointing out things that were being done wrong regularly, not just treating people fairly. So, and then as I got older, they adopted. I have 3 adopted African American brothers and 1 adopted African American sister.
Wow.
Um, so, um, so we went through a lot, and we went through a lot in our family too, because the extended family wasn't too happy about those adoptions in the beginning. And
If you could take that camera back down a little bit because it's
yeah,
cutting off
yeah,
your head
sorry.
now. Oh, great.
So,
Thank you.
so the extended family wasn't very happy about the adoption. So you would say, like, I grew up very, very cognizant of racism and both sides, and not just seeing black people as people or loving my siblings, but also seeing it was very much pointed out to me what was being done to them and to African American culture my whole life. So just I would say I grew up with my eyes very wide open.
Right. So it was a lot about basically because you had some socialization that, with that group of people, understanding them and knowing them, you think that was probably the biggest key? I always say that we're not defined by race, we're defined by culture, right? And that means that, if we live in the same neighborhood or go to the same schools, go to the same stores, we become more associated with the people there. And it's not as much about race, it's perhaps more about that culture that you created around you. Would you agree with that?
I think so, but I think you can also be around people of other races and still keep to yourself, right? You have
Mm,
to have a home life that makes you open to
mm.
friendships with other people. So, like desegregation and things like that that happened back in the day, I think they were really a great first huge step. But I think that if families in their homes don't teach their kids to be open to it, then it can become an um, uh, artificial collection of people who never really open up to each other. I think it really depends a lot on what you're learning at home too.
Yes, yes, I think it's been important. Well, let's go back for a moment here in this country. As you know, we had a really unfortunate era in this country called slavery. And I want to ask you, starting with you, Mr. Kearney, that what do you think the effects of slavery has been to the African American community as well as the white community in regards to slavery?
Um, do you want to pick a starting point in this
Whatever you want.
country? I would like to start with this because we could go back to ancient times. Let's start with this country. The problem with this country, and it go the white man, privileged white male white privilege, started with the Constitution. It was written by a bunch of white men, and then there was case precedent set for nearly 100 years.
Mhm.
And then one day they decided, okay, black people could have what we have, and they put a little scribble in the Constitution saying that. That doesn't change.
We like the dog, Doc.
Sorry.
That's okay. Go ahead. Go ahead, Jim. Sorry.
That doesn't change 100 years of mindset, and it doesn't mean all of a sudden everybody starts at the same starting line. And now we could add that to women of all colors. It
Yeah.
wasn't until 100 years ago that they were allowed
1820.
to vote. And
Right.
then there were nearly 150 years worth of legal precedent that had to be surmounted. So when we talk about overcoming the social and legal aspects of what slavery did to this country, it starts back from that document. And what that document was, who wrote that document and the ideas behind that document. Now, the effects on it, we're seeing it to this day.
Mm-hmm.
The ignorance, someone brought it up to me today. A few hours ago, I believe they arrested a couple of reporters. And I know I won't talk specifically about what's going on in Minneapolis, but they arrested a couple of reporters. A black gentleman and I believe two females, if I'm not mistaken, but I know one was black. And they used handcuffs on the black man and something called flex cuffs on the two others.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, there are white people saying, "What's the difference?" Well, there is a difference. Whether it's conscious or subconscious, they restrain the black man first. Now, that's subconsciously or consciously. I can't speak to the actions of another person, but it's subconsciously. Why did that person feel the need to restrain the black man first? First of all, he's a reporter. Why was it necessary to use metal handcuffs on him? And then, we don't have any more handcuffs. Let's use, which is basically zip ties, which are much more comfortable
Right.
on the other people.
Right.
The instinct was to restrain the black person first. Now, I can't speak to the mindset of that officer, but subconsciously, why? Is
So
it
do you think
fear?
that stems all the way back to slavery
Absolutely.
and the fact of that bondage idea and the fact, but where's the Dr. Buber, where's the fear coming from? Is that coming from slavery as well? The fact that something was done to this group of people and now they fear revenge?
Fear in white people, you mean?
No, the fear of black people.
Oh, well, yeah, I think slavery had a lot to do with it. And what I've noticed over the years, I think there are so many subtle things that were taught in slavery. For example, not making eye contact with the white man, looking down, not looking
Right,
up, all kinds of subtle things that then have been taught from generation to generation. And, 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 and then the white person during slavery times, we white people bred slaves for physical strength. I mean,
sure,
there were breeding programs. It wasn't just they were property. They were bred intentionally to be stronger physically, to work harder in the fields, and it was a very intentional program that went on down in the South. So when you're going to breed people to be stronger physically,
right.
and they're not making eye contact with you, but physically you've intentionally made them stronger than you are, then and you don't know what they're thinking in their heads when they're not making eye contact. And so it becomes they white people became afraid of what they created.
Oh,
and
mm.
and and they knew these strong people who were taking beatings on the farms. I mean, I'm very blunt, okay?
Yeah, no, no, this is real talk.
Very strong people they had bred and created to be strong physical workers. It's when you have to take a whip to beat them, physically you aren't as strong as they are. Of course you're afraid of them. But
Mm.
because they're not sitting there taking a beating and not angry, and you can't see in their eyes if they're angry or not, but they have to be.
Wow,
So
wow.
of course, like, you've created an enemy yourself who you can't see in their eyes and see what they're thinking, and you have to use weapons to hurt them physically. So you're weaker. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the slave master thinking. So I mean, and it's so that's what I see, and it always makes me so. I can tell you in examples of my family when a black person wouldn't make eye contact with me. My father's family was very wealthy. It would make me want to cry, because I just thought, where did they learn that they're not allowed to look at me, in the eye? It's so sad. But to a white master who knew he was physically weaker, it's actually pretty intimidating.
Well, I remember you talking
So
about not only that I'm sorry,
does that
as
make
a
sense? Does that make sense?
oh,
I mean,
total sense. It makes total sense. Matter of fact, it was almost profound. So that was very good. I remember as a kid, and I guess I have to represent the African American on the show today. Since my guest had something come up, my other guest, that I remember just distinctly that we'll be walking on the sidewalk and going uptown, we called it. And I was a little child, and I was holding my sister's hand, and it was a white couple that was coming towards us. And she said, "You need to hurry up, get off the sidewalk, and let them pass." I remember that. And, think about what that's putting in my mind. And I really fought, even at that young age. I said, why? I mean, we're all, why can't they move? At that young age, I asked that question, and she had no answer, just, you need to get out of the way. There were times, other instances that I had as a youth coming up, and I just kind of want to share those because, again, on this particular show today, because the African American reputation wasn't available, I have to be that today. That's because I am that, and I live that. Where I would be out hunting, and we should hunt birds, right, and stuff like that. And that's the birds today. I have no for that, but I remember being called the N word and being shot at with shotguns and hearing the pellets dropping all around our head. I mean, I personally had to deal with, racism in many ways. Don't get me wrong. I know, because I'm educated in this, that all white people are nowhere near that bad. They're not, but there are some, right? And we kind of talked a little bit about that. I want to talk a little bit about education, okay? Back in 1933, there was a book that was written, was called Miseducation of the Negro by Carter G. Woodson. right? And it was talking about how basically black people were somehow in this process, Dr. Hill, that you talked about, were taught to be feel inferior, right? Which, and as a result of that, it made others feel superior, right?
Mhm.
The thing that I say about that, I think in that book it also said it was not just miseducation of the quote unquote Negro, it was miseducation of everybody. When you talk about from the beginning of history, because somewhere someone was taught to feel that they were superior. Somewhere someone was taught to feel that they were inferior, right? And so let's talk a little bit about education and the education system. Jim, why don't you take that
Yeah.
one up? And how that has caused exacerbation with this racism thing that we have today.
You want me to start in the schools?
That's fine.
Oh, it can't be left to the schools. It can't. And if it does, it needs to be brought in from the outside, especially in this climate. It wouldn't have done me any good as a kid. I don't think it would do any kid any good to be. First of all, you can't task teachers with it. It's too sensitive of a time. Conversations like this are me and you have spoke about it. I think this is the only way people get an understanding of other cultures and how I I tripped over stuff and how I learned stuff and how I became to ask questions and call my friends to ask them stuff. Um, but learning, they teach this stuff in school, but they don't. They teach the history of slavery. They teach the boats coming over. They teach this. They teach the Civil War. They teach how Abraham Lincoln freed but none of this is accurate. I mean, we all know this now. So they
Well,
kind of
it's not that some of it is not accurate. I think the problem
well,
is that they don't teach the positive and the contributions that the African people gave to society.
that's what by accurate I meant is they still paint it as the white people gave the black people their freedom.
Exactly. And that's
Yeah.
big.
That's it. We gave them something. Be grateful. I think that,
And
and I'm not saying it's prevalent subconsciously today in most people, I guess. Consciously, obviously, in those who wear the white hoods and openly, display hate. But it's that it's that document that says we now give you something that we had.
So, Dr. Hill, you wanted to comment?
yeah, history is often false. History is written by the one with the power and the winner. And I have a great example of that in regards to race. So we don't teach enough in schools about we don't teach enough about what was happening in the Caribbean during slavery in American
Right,
history. And
right,
it's a huge part of what was happening in the United States,
right.
right? But kids in America don't learn about that in school. They don't learn about what happened in Haiti. They don't learn about the slave rebellion. So, in the places where slaves actually took the power and
Hmm.
took their freedom, you don't learn about that at all. So, any power to African Americans is taken away in our history books. Not just their contributions, but their power is taken away. And in the Dutch islands of the Curacao and Aruba, I was in Curacao one time, and it was uh, um, a festival of all the there were parades just of the black people in Curacao, and they were telling their history and their story. And I sat down with a bunch of people practicing for the parade, and they started telling me all this stuff about what had happened in their history in Curacao and why they were starting to have these celebrations now. And the story is that after the uprisings in Hades, in the Dutch islands, including Curacao,
Right.
slaves started to have an uprising, and the United States told the Dutch, to hide it because they didn't want their slaves to get any ideas.
Oh,
And the Dutch came in, said we gave our slaves their freedom. They took away all the weapons, all trace of any kind of uprising, and buried them and rewrote the history books to keep the
yeah.
United States happy.
Right.
So then they're going in and finding these weapons and things that have been hidden and buried. And they're like, what's this about? You know? So history was completely rewritten to take away the power of the Black person in gaining their freedom.
Right, right. Well, it goes all the way back, and as Mr. Kearney was also alluding to earlier, ancient history, with the Egyptians and the Kemet people, and the statues of noses and things being knocked off that show that they were black people, and then the books that were written, and then when the Greeks came in and they took that African Egyptian culture and they rewrote it and put their names on it, their stamps on it. So a lot of those historical that progress that was made, right, was buried, and a lot of people do not understand that. And we're going to get to why this is important, right? Because that education about superiority and inferiority is the thing that I believe is propelling racism the way it is today. Because somewhere in there, mama, daddy, grandmama, brother, sister are teaching their children, whether white or black, that they're either inferior or superior, and they might not be saying the words out of their mouths as much as they might just the actions that they're doing, sitting there just watching the news. Oh, those people. Oh, it could be the simplest little thing. And so those are some of the things that I want to, bring out today and talk a little bit more about. Okay, so I also want to make sure that everyone recognizes and what we that everything that we see is not racism. I want to be clear on that. A lot of people think, I remember when I was a child, well, I wasn't a child, well, I wasn't, there was a child in the store with this lady. They were white, and they were trying on shoes. And the child said, and I told the story before, I don't like black. The kid was talking about the color of the shoe. The mom said, shh.
Makes it so much worse.
Right. Like, don't say that. Don't say. And I'm like, ma'am, she's talking about the color of the shoe. She's not talking about me. Oversensitive. The other day, I saw a lady post respectfully that she was standing in a store. She had a mask on. She's African American. She had a mask on. Behind her, she had a family without a mask on. And it immediately went into a rant of they asked her to put on a mask, but did not ask them. And I just replied on them, which I tried to stay out of, but I said, how do you know it just wasn't incompetence, right? How do you know that an employee wasn't incompetent in asking them or telling them that they need to have on a mask, as opposed to first thing is racism, right? We have to be careful about that because everything isn't racism. What is your take on that, Jim?
That's like crying wolf. Because if everything's that, then you can make the argument that nothing's that.
Right. Very, very good point.
But
okay,
if I just may add, I mean, again, I think part of the problem is if we group everybody together, whether it be by color, by religion, by region, then we lose sight that everybody's an individual. So if she felt that it came from a racist area, I don't know where that dialogue begins between her and those people that she felt slighted by, but she felt it. I can't, especially as a white man who has no idea what it's like. I said, a friend of mine, when we were speaking not too long ago, and I think I had spoken to you about this. Like he said, it's just the idea that leaving my house and my children leaving the house in the morning, there is the probability of them running into a situation where something that's what's happening in the news right now is going to happen to them is more likely than it happening to me or someone who looks like me.
Right.
So if she felt that way, there's a reason why she felt that way, and I don't expect her to necessarily say that's not racist.
Very good.
So I mean, there is that. There is perspective, even though we might say it's that's not racist.
Right. Well, my point was just to infuse the idea
Yes.
that it
Oh, I
might
get it.
not have been racist. With the first thing that happened, oh, it's racism.
Right.
Well, we don't. It might not have been that. It just could have
Absolutely.
been just ignorance or laziness or whatever. Doctor Vilberg, what would you like to say about that?
Well, I just think, as a woman in medicine and in the fight community, as a female doctor, I think that I understand where it comes from, assuming that it was racism, because I assume a lot of times that things are said and done to me because I'm female. I mean, and it's because it's been said and done a lot of times. So
Right.
I don't feel the need to tell someone that wasn't racism because they've experienced it enough to think to be on the lookout for that. And the same way with me as a woman. I mean, I can't even begin to tell you how many times I've thought in my mind, would you have just said that to me if I were a man, you know?
Right.
So I mean, yeah, everything
Gender
isn't
bias is
racism, but you
real.
can't fault the person for assuming that it is, because they assume it is so because it has been so many times.
Right, right, and you're absolutely right on that. My thing is just to infuse a little different thought, so that we won't just call that. I want to transition here just for a moment and talk about some of the incidents that happened this week, and we'll first start out with the one of the murder, and I don't know what else to call it,
Execution.
yeah, of Mr. Floyd. And I just kind of want to get, first of all, you guys probably seen the video of Mr. Kearney as a correctional officer. What were your initial thoughts on that?
Um, well, first of all, I want everybody to know that there's a lot of people crying about, well, the officer deserves due process and he should be, his time will come. What people don't understand about the law is that you are arrested under probable cause. They effected an arrest on Mr. Floyd because they had probable cause of forgery. Okay, I'll get back to what they did in a second. There is enough. There's 9 minutes of video of probable cause to arrest him on involuntary manslaughter right now,
Hmm.
where he could be put in custody.
Right,
To stop what's going on right there. This is not about due process. It's due process as far as charging him with murder. It is not due process to arrest him. He can be arrested right now for involuntary manslaughter. It's on video. The
right,
investigation can find that
right.
he's not guilty. It's not. It doesn't rise to the level of murder, but he should be arrested right now. That's not a cry. That's not a social cry. That's not a cry to stop the protesting. It's just the law. The
Why do you
fact
think
that they're
there's
not.
such a delay? Well, Mr. Kearney, why do you think there's such a delay? Because as you said, is absolutely correct. Correct. He got fired the next day, right? And everybody saw it right on social
Right.
media. What happened? Why
Yeah.
do you think there's such a delay in just at least putting him behind bars? Because that's why a lot of people are rioting.
Because that's the way that's the way it is. If he was white, that doesn't happen. And I don't know. I mean, I know why it is, but I can't articulate why it is. There is no rational reason why anybody. First of all, from a training standpoint, I just read that man had 19 years on the job. He's 1 to 6 years away from a pension. I don't know what was going through his mind. I have no idea. I don't think anybody stands roll call saying I'm going to kill a black person today.
Yeah.
Um, I saw as much of the footage as I could, and I pieced it together with, the experience I have. When a man is laying on the floor, belly down, restrained with his hands behind his back, it is hands off. He's done. He no longer poses a threat.
You ever tried to get up with your hands behind your back?
Yeah, I have, and that's what I actually said to someone. Not
What?
to be funny for a minute, but what I said is like I would have I mean, I don't want to make a joke, but you step back and say, I'd like to see you try to get up.
Right.
You know, I mean, you
Right.
can't. And
Right.
even if he did, what is he gonna do? Run away? Like you can't catch him? It doesn't. Nothing. None of it. None of it makes sense. The guys
Right.
executed him, whether he meant to or not. He executed him. Ignorance of the law is no excuse.
Right. Well, Dr. Hill.
Again,
Well, thank you, Jim. I think Jim's passionate about that. I'm sorry to interrupt
no,
you, man.
no, it's all right.
But so, Dr. Viva, what are your thoughts?
I mean, it's horrible. It makes me want to cry too. I think about my brothers. I mean, one of my adopted African American brothers is bipolar, and usually I'm the oldest of all. The oldest of eight, and I'm the doctor, and so usually I'm the one that's supposed to help take care of my siblings, and I've done it over and over again, right? But when he was having problems and his bipolar disease was out of control, I said he can't come here to Atlanta. He'll get shot by the cops when he does
Mm,
something crazy. I can't
mm,
let him come live with me. They'll kill him here. And the fact that I have to think about this stuff. I have one brother who lives with me who's an Olympic gold medalist in track. He's
wow.
out running. He's out running every morning here in Atlanta. And when I see a guy out running getting shot by white people, then I start thinking I have to worry that my brother might get shot, um, because he's out running. I mean, it just makes me think, what if this is one of my brothers?
Yeah, yeah, it's really scary. There, I want to kind of keep moving through this. There's a lot to talk about, and again, we're just barely, touching the edges here. But there is an idea that that all cops are not bad, and we know that, right? All cops are not bad. In fact, I think the majority of them are good. But what would you say, Mr. Kearney, about the guys who were perhaps just standing around and maybe not doing anything because it makes the bad guys win?
Now I can say they're just as, I mean, not just as complicit. They're complicit. They deserve jail. Um, but I'd be a hypocrite to say that when I was wearing the uniform, I never saw anything like that, so I can't tell you what I would or would not have done in
Mm,
my younger years if there was another officer doing, restrainings. I can't speak to what I would have done 20 years ago. That's why I'm honest about stuff like that. I, those officers were put in a tough situation by that one officer who had his knee on his throat. Well, not on his throat, on his carotid,
right.
for 9 minutes. At some point, that's where I hold those other three accountable. When that EMT nurse asked to take his pulse, that guy stopped being a cop. And those other three either had to be one or decide to take their shields off and stand by and watch that man being executed. And that's what they chose to do.
Some people talked about the fact that someone should have jumped in or something. There were some bystanders there. They were talking
They would
about,
have been shot and killed. They would
thank
have been
you,
shot and killed. And that's
bottom line.
anybody who says that, that's like telling somebody that, I'm sorry, I'm raising my voice.
No, please.
Years ago, was it the Ferguson case? Years ago, the fact that we have to go back 7 years,
Right. Yeah. It's
it
been
was the
happening
Ferguson
long.
case, and they were saying why didn't the cops shoot him in the knee? Well, I dare anyone to pick up a firearm and go to a range, and I draw a circle about 3 inches in
Yeah.
diameter,
Kind of hard to do.
and tell you to put two in that circle in a stationary target.
Right.
So just as I can sit there and say that's a ridiculous statement, to suggest that someone should have tried to prevent an armed officer who is in the middle of murdering somebody with three other armed officers standing by watching, and to rationally think that they weren't going to be murdered as well, is just complete stupidity. Now, if somebody wanted to be a hero and try to save that man's life, then
There would have
I
been a
mean,
more,
absolutely, I would be here saluting him today. But I don't begrudge anybody for not doing
or
it.
her in this case.
I I blame the three uniformed bystanders.
Right, right. What are your thoughts on that, Dr. Hill?
No, I totally agree. I read something where the girl who was videoing it has been harassed for not intervening, and I think they were fortunate that they didn't get arrested or something else just for the comments they were making to the cops while they were videoing. I mean, I think that just standing there and videoing and saying, hey, are you going to just sit there and watch him kill that guy? I think that was really brave. I mean, I think that to with several cops there, like he's saying, like what they did in and of itself was very brave. And
Yeah, yeah.
if they had done more, yes, they would have been. I don't know if they would have been killed, arrested, but the harm would have come to them. I,
Yeah, what we definitely want to, talk a little bit about the camera. I think is a really big point to be made in that as well. Mr. Kearney, as a correctional officer, what kind of training, any kind of martial arts training or whatever that these guys get, real training, because you got to know the consequences of what you're doing and what it could do.
Absolutely.
Right. And all, I mean, any good trainer will teach you that if you are a strong punch and you hit somebody, that's why I can't understand why people are punching each other in the face the way they do, because you could knock somebody unconscious and they don't get up. Their head could hit the pavement and they don't get up. And that's been happening a lot lately. So I'm wondering, is there any type of thing about consequences of those type of maneuvers as far as martial arts, or are they just really just not that trained at all when it comes to
Um,
self defense?
I could speak to New York City. It's if they were allowed to fire those officers, fire them the next day, then they don't have like that. That couldn't happen in New York legally. That just couldn't happen in New York. There's
Mm,
union laws and all that other stuff. They would be immediately stripped and suspended. With all that other stuff that goes on,
mm,
they just need to be fired. So I don't know what their training is like. I can tell you that. Um, I would imagine that most state policies, as far as training law enforcement, they offer very, very vague training for a
mm,
reason. For a reason. Um, people cry out, and rightfully so, that officers should be trained in jujitsu, especially because there's no
mm,
striking and stuff. But what they don't understand is that the public's not ready for that. Because if they see videos of officers of people being choked, and the public doesn't know the difference between a blood choke and I'm sorry, doctor, and asphyxiation choke. You could better, but they don't know the difference, and it's clearly in black and white in at least the use of force directives for New York City, that unless you feel that your life is in danger,
mm.
the use of deadly force
Well, Trump doesn't
is not
necessarily.
authorized. So a choke, as far as our departments were concerned, is deadly physical force. It doesn't matter whether you're trained in they
Okay,
didn't. The very, 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 very basics, and they actually had a list of step one, step two, step three,
right,
but they don't take into account size. Everything is very generic, and they do that for a
right,
reason, because they don't want, they want very limited exposure to lawsuits.
right, right.
So
Dr.
it's all
Hill,
about you. It's about you justifying what you did and why.
right, right. Dr. Hill, from a medical standpoint, choking someone out, right? I mean, is there a difference in the brain damage of them going completely out and almost going out? I think there would be.
well, yeah, I mean, it depends on when you stop, right? You don't die as soon as you pass out. We know that
Right.
from fighting. So, I mean, I don't really think of any significant damage if it stops immediately when you pass out when it comes to an
Okay.
MMA fight, right? I mean, but it's also kind of hard to tap out when you're in cuffs. Like, that's what I was thinking. Like,
Mhm.
so how does the officer know at what point? I don't know if the officer knows at what point the person was being affected when
Right.
they're choking them, right? So,
Shouldn't be choked once they're cuffed, though. That's see that once they're restrained.
right, yeah,
Once they're restrained, it's hands off, because all you have to do is
Right.
slide your arm up. I mean, it's not that hard. You go from the bottom and you slide your arm up and put them on the back of their shoulder. How can you not control a person like that?
Right.
And if you need a second person, one comes on the other side, and they teach small joint manipulation, something as simple as a wrist.
Right.
Pain compliance. They use the term pain compliance. You apply as much pain as necessary for them to comply. What was that man doing?
Right.
He
Right.
was laying on the floor saying, "I'm not doing anything and can't breathe." He was complying to everything. I didn't see any orders. There were no orders being given to him. So when I talk about there's a very vague use of force directive in New York City, and I would imagine there's a very vague one just about in every municipality in the country, you have to be able to write and justify what you did. Now, obviously, this man can't justify what he did, but he didn't even try. There were no orders. He wasn't giving directions. He wasn't giving orders to him to stop doing something. And why? Because he wasn't doing anything.
Right.
My personal opinion on what happened with that is that man was bullied. I'm talking about the officer. That officer was bullied
That
by.
brings me to my next question. I was
He
going to
was
ask you
he was
about.
bullied by the bystanders. He was probably bullied by that man's size. He's a big man. Not that that officer looked like any frail little thing, but again, fear. He was bullied by that crowd who kept telling him, "Let him go, let him go, let him go."
Right. So I want to talk about that. The type of mentality, in the process of choosing people to be officers.
Yep.
Do you think it's flawed? Because if you've been bullied in school or you've been bullied or whatever, and your only thing now you got a gun and you become a badge, and now you can exert that, if you will. Do you think that's playing a role in some of these cases? Let's go back to the fear of black men and big. Let's go back to what Dr. Hills talked about and how they were, bred, and the fact that we are big and we were been big,
Yeah.
before we even came here to the United States, we were big too, right? And
Mm-hmm.
yes, you're correct, Dr. Hill, in that process. But now we have that fear factor from a person who was maybe small in stature, a person who was bullied, and now they have a gun, they have a badge, they have authority. Right? Do you think that we should be looking a little closer at the type of people that we're making officers?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. There's an age limit in New York. I'd imagine there's an age limit. I don't know what the age limit is here. I think it's 20. I think that's extremely too young. I think 22 at this point is extremely too young.
I agree.
Because, I mean, when I was a kid, 18 was an adult. I mean, legally 18 is an adult, but mentally, kids are not adults at 22 anymore. Anyone on here can comment and say, I'm an adult if you want. Put on a shield, put on a firearm, go patrol the streets, be out of your element, make good decisions, and see if you're an adult.
There's a lot of responsibility.
Measure your responses. Try to and I'm not making excuses for this man, please. I'm talking about the good cops who make mistakes, not mistakes that result in this. Just make mistakes.
Right.
At 22, your brain is not formed to the point to understand that the uniform you're wearing is probably the reason why you're being treated the way you're being treated, and not because of who you are. You chose to put on a uniform. Part of it is public perception right now is that you're not the good guy.
Yeah.
Deal with it. Deal with it.
If you want it as a career, you got to deal with that.
You chose it. It's great. In most areas, you get health benefits, you get a pension, good retirement. Deal with it. Don't get that officer might have been bullied his whole life, but he was bullied in that moment. He let himself get bullied by a bunch of bystanders with phones telling him, "You're killing him, you're killing him." And he's saying, "I'm the professional. I know what I'm doing. Video me all you want." It turned into a pissing contest, Johnny. I'm sorry. It turned into a pissing contest. And he felt he could do it because for whatever reason, consciously, subconsciously, whatever words might have transpired between him and that man. Listen, Mr. Floyd could have said whatever he wanted to that man.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter.
Right.
It does not matter. He was there to effect an arrest. Once he's cuffed, you pick him up, you put him in the back of the car, and you bring him in.
Yeah. Yeah.
There is yet to be an explanation as to why, because they can't offer one, and that's why he should be arrested.
Right.
But he was bullied into that by the and it's not the bystander's fault, but he was bullied into it. He didn't. I know. I'm the cop. I'm the professional. I know everything.
I get it.
No humility, no admittance of ignorance.
Wow. Wow. That's pretty profound, actually. That's a different take. Dr. Hill, I want to ask you about the power of the cell phone. I made a comment on yesterday. Somebody made a post, and I think it was after Will Smith had put something out about the fact that this has been going on for a long time, but the difference is it was filmed. I kind of added on to that. I think that the cell phone cameras may be the biggest tool, bigger than any leader, any speech, or any march, the biggest tool in civil rights of all times. What are your thoughts about the power of those phone cameras today and what people are being able to see?
I mean, sure. I think you're right. I think it's always been going on. I've always seen it. My entire life I've seen this kind of stuff going on, and it's something that I've had to think about with my brothers. I've had a brother come out of a movie theater with the N word carved backwards uh in his front window of his car backwards. You know how
Wow.
long that takes?
Wow.
Backwards, so he would read it in the inside, the right direction, right by the movie theater, and nobody saw anything. Like, this stuff happens all the time to my brothers. And I think that it'll keep happening unless white people admit that it's happening. I get tired of the yes buts. What was he doing? Yes, but, like, it doesn't matter whether someone has committed a crime or not. Does not define whether they're a good person or not.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone can make a mistake, and there's never an excuse. The bullying thing, this guy, but he put his knee on the guy's neck in the first place before he was being bullied. Like, there's never an excuse for this. And I think the more people see it, the more it's going to be difficult for white people to keep saying it's not happening, because
Right.
until white people will admit that there's a problem, nothing's
Mm.
going to get fixed. uh,
Wow.
all the yes buts need to go away. Yes, but there's no but. There's no excuse. And you can't keep making excuses when you're seeing video after video after video. I mean, you can, but you're pretty stupid if you do. I mean,
Right.
so
Right.
yeah, I mean, this I have a friend who's an African American professor, and he and I were talking. He publishes a lot of stuff, and I said the problem with racism is that, in my opinion, we cut down the tree and we didn't grind out the root, and we just
Mm.
pretend like the root wasn't there. And
Mm.
and white people can continue to pretend like it isn't there. African Americans are not pretending like it's not there. White people are. So
Mm.
the videos need to come more. There need to be more videos. It needs to be in the face of every white person who won't admit that there's a problem, over and over and over again.
Right. Right. What are your thoughts on that, Mr. Kearney?
I fear that there will be a numbing effect. I have to be honest with you. I think it's very
At
important.
some point, you mean?
I think, yeah. I mean, look what's happened in the past 3 weeks. It took how many days for Ahmaud Arbery's video to come out?
Yeah.
And since then, we've had what, 3 others, 2, 3 others. I mean, you start losing count. We started losing count years ago. We had cell phone footage then. Yeah, I mean, it's a great tool to use for prosecution. It's a great tool to open up eyes if the eyes want to see it. But for how many years have we been numb to this? We saw Rodney King get beat how many years ago?
Yeah.
We saw the 41 shots in New York City how many years ago? You know that those officers were all acquitted and one got promoted.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, so at what point, we see it. I just feel, I mean, how long before we get numb to it, or does something change?
Yeah, I think
I don't know which one's which. I'm
the
sorry.
real question is definitely about the change. I do want to talk a little bit about when we talk about the cell phones as well, and there's some positive and negative things that are coming up. But let me quickly say about the rioting that's going on over there. Um, no one condones that. I mean, no decent person is going to condone a riot. This is what I want to bring out, though. I want to say this: Johnny Davis Live, real talk, real solutions. Okay, so you had Mr. Colin Kaepernick,
Mm-hmm.
who says that this is happening to black men. And he decides that as opposed to burning anything, stomping on the flag like we see people do, throwing it in the trash or anything like that, I am going to do what many of you do when you pray at night to your Savior. Humbly get down on my knee in this respectful manner, even though in protest. So you have someone who was then ostracized, beaten, if you were beaten, like in the social, media things, if you will, and lost his job and just become, really a true martyr. And he was trying to do it peacefully. But then you have another side that says that's not working. So they do riots. Now we don't condone that, and you need to stop that. I don't agree with that. But can Dr. Hill take this one? What are your thoughts on what does one do to get their message of pain and suffering across to the oppressor?
I think that the best way is to do it without reacting in anger. I think that riots don't help. I think they hurt the cause. I thought taking the knee was, um, I thought it was pretty profound myself. I believe one of my brothers, I mean, I did have a one of them is a professional athlete. He did the same thing, and nobody ostracized him. Um, uh, I think that uh, maybe African Americans need to be more vulnerable and real and with people, and try to tell them, without anger as much. But I'm not sure. I think that
There's a group that a
white
lot of us do that, by the way.
white people need to hear their stories, and I think like the other gentleman said, getting to know people, listening to their stories, being willing to listen to their stories. I think that it only takes being friends with one person who tells you how they feel and really listening to them to open up somebody's eyes.
Mm.
But not in anger. Really listen to what they've been through. um, uh, it just takes knowing one person and listening to them. But if the message is given in anger, then you're not going to get the response that you want. I don't know what else to say.
Right, right, right. And I certainly do understand that. And I want to just shift gears. We're not going to
I
keep
mean,
you.
I can't speak for all white people, right? I'm
Right,
not like the token white person because I didn't grow up like that. What it would
right.
take to make someone understand that another person is a human being, like, that's a very difficult thing for me to say because I can't imagine being that person who didn't.
If I
Right.
may, if I may,
Yes.
Yeah.
um, obviously, the rioting, the burning down of buildings, of course, it's wrong. But if you're going to group, if it's detrimental to the message that what's going on is wrong, and you're going to, if it's detrimental to that cause, then I just beg of people to stop and think that you're projecting on the people who are protesting the same thing you're asking the black community not to do on law enforcement, and pigeonhole everyone wearing blue as the guy who was kneeling on Mr. Floyd's neck. So don't judge those protesters but at the same time, asking people not to judge all cops based on what that one person did. Those protesters don't represent Mr. Floyd any more than that cop represents every
The
other.
majority. The majority. Right. I certainly agree with that. It's just so much to get. I'm not going to keep you guys, too much longer, but there are a couple little important points that I want to get out. The other big issue that we had that went on this past week was the lady in the park.
Yeah.
Look, I can see the look of both of you
Well,
guys.
that hits very close to home, Johnny.
I
That
know.
was your hometown,
Listen,
right?
listen, I told you, Johnny Davis Live, real talk, real solutions. I knew this was going to be a tough show for a lot of people. And I really, by the way, I have so much respect for you guys for coming on today. And I'm sure my audience also has a lot of respect for you guys for coming on and speaking honestly and openly. And I certainly do appreciate that, guys. So it means a lot. But I do want to talk a little bit about the lady in the park. I'm going to call her the
John,
lady in
can
the
I say
park because, frankly, I didn't
one
get her
more thing?
name.
Can I say one more thing about the rioting? And
Sure.
and this is speaking to white people. Like I said, the rioting doesn't help the cause, and I think it's true not to stereotype. But you and I talked about this one time. I'll try to be fast, but I think there's something that white people don't understand about African Americans. And
Hmm.
my dad was a professor of sociology, chair of sociology at a African American college. So
Mm.
sociology is very important to me, and how we view groups of people. And something that white people don't understand is that African cultures are very emotional cultures.
Yes.
So white people, if they come from like Germanic origins, or British origins, they're stiff, they're quiet, they don't show emotion so much.
Mm.
The African culture is very emotional. And if you've ever seen an African American child die in the emergency room, you know what I'm talking about.
Yes.
Because or go to church in an African American church. This is a loud, emotional culture. And so when you take an emotional culture and tell them to shut up, and tell them not to make eye contact, and tell them to be quiet, um, and they're angry about something and they're not allowed to express it, it's
Hmm.
going to come out worse. And so this anger that you see, it isn't just anger over this, it's anger over all the times they were told to shut up because it's not in the cultural nature to be quiet. When you grieve, when
Right.
African Americans grieve, they grieve loudly. When they're happy, they dance and they celebrate loudly.
Right.
And when they're angry loudly. And so it's not just because of this, and it's not that they're angry people, it's that their culture, your culture is different.
A lot
And
of empathy.
you're forcing a culture to behave under other cultural norms that are not theirs. So it's not right, but it explodes because of how much is suppressed over time. And I think that white people at least step back and acknowledge that it might help. It's, the riots are wrong, the anger's wrong, but it's been suppressed so much, and it's
Wow.
going to come out more loudly.
I
So
think that's a very good point, Dr. Hill. I certainly do appreciate it and everything. That was just a very, very good comment. Now I want to talk a little bit about the lady in the park.
Amy Cooper. Put her name out there so everybody knows. Amy Cooper.
Yeah, what are your thoughts on what happened there, Mr. Kearney?
She weaponized the police
Yeah.
against the black man just because she felt she could.
What do
And
you think?
that's
What do you think that privilege comes from? What do you think? What do you think that? What do you think? How was she empowered with that privilege?
uh, how was she empowered with it? Well, the fact that when you call 911, I think that you're automatically perceived as the victim. And then when the police show up and see a white person, and in this case, a white female, and a black man, the assumption is the black man's wrong.
Right.
Um, Fortunately, in this case, it seems like some sort of justice is going to be served. Luckily,
It's ugly, man.
but that's the ugly. That I mean, The images you see elsewhere, that's right in your face. But when you see a civilian try to weaponize the police to potentially put someone in a position that could ruin the rest of their lives because they're showing up with some preconceived notions. I don't want to make excuses for anybody. I'm gearing off topic, but calling 911 to weaponize with the police coming, weaponizing the using the police as your weapon, making up stories as well, but just calling the police, feeling that the right to call the police on someone calling you out for breaking the law, just saying put your dog on a leash.
Right.
Like, the audacity to think that the police are going to come and just take your side because of the color of your skin, or you feel some sort of entitlement that you could be in the park and do what you want. And because if I was there and told her to put her dog on a leash, not knowing who I am or who I used to be, she wouldn't have called the cops on me.
She wouldn't have. I don't think.
That's the difference. No, she wouldn't have.
I'm just going to play devil's advocate.
I know I can't be in her mind, but I know.
Right.
I know she wouldn't have.
Right.
And maybe it's because the way I said it, maybe it's the way she perceives me. It doesn't make a difference. She wouldn't have called 911. She wouldn't have weaponized the police. She used the police as her weapon.
Yeah. That's happening a lot. That's been happening for a very long time. Emmett Till, something very similar, happened to him years ago. Back obviously in the civil rights era, which we're still in. Basically, that I think they said that he whistled at her or something like that. Years later, now she comes back and said he didn't whistle, but he was beaten badly, killed, and everything. And so that's been going on for a very long time. Again, compliments to the cell phone. That's what helped this thing change.
Yes.
Dr. Hill, when we talk about one of the things that happened in the process of her calling was the change of voice. It was like a trained, a practiced call. That octave changed in her voice. Do you know anything about this? There's something going on in the white community that people are teaching them how to weaponize, if you will, their voices, and just not only the words. We know that she knows how to use the key words, but it was something in the octaves of a voice that changed. You know what I'm talking about?
I think that women have learned for a long time to use what they've got and how to manipulate people. And it's something that women are pretty good at doing. I mean, again, on the other end, I mean, it comes from, suppression of women's rights and everything. Use what you've got. But I think pretty much all women can probably do that.
Right, right.
I mean, we know how to play the victim if we need to. Even I do if I wanted to, and I'm like, I'm the last thing from a victim, but we all know how to get our way if we want to as women.
Okay, so I want to tilt here just a minute with that in that same area though. The emboldenment, the confidence in that she would get the help that she wanted. Is there anything in our political climate right now that might have emboldened her to do that? Do you think there's anything that might be going on in the political climate that's emboldening people to do more of this? We've seen a lot more of this seemingly lately.
In New York?
But
specifically,
is there a lot more, or is?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
But it's always been.
Well, whether it's more, whether it's been more. Yes.
He's from New York. I can't speak to the mind of a New Yorker. I guess I don't. He sounds like he has an idea about it, and you sound like you want me to say something, Johnny. But I think that
I'm sorry.
You just put white privilege. This is my thought. Put white privilege in the Urban Dictionary and put her picture next to it. I mean, I don't know what else to say. It's
right.
Right. I mean, I mean. White
Um,
privilege. I'm not going to get into politics, Johnny.
Well,
I live
it's
in
not
the
about
South,
trying to
remember?
understand. I just asked a question. I'm just saying, is
Politics will
there
get
any?
me killed sooner than anything else down here.
Right. I'm just asking a question about, do you think the political climate right now is emboldening these type of actions? Mr. Kearney,
yes,
take it on.
yes, especially in New York right now. There's a mayor that many people of all races do not like. Um, the long history, I think, in most areas. I'll ask you, Johnny. Do you feel as comfortable as calling 911 as, let's say, maybe I would? How do you feel about that? Do you think
No,
if right, I
absolutely
don't?
not. No, I don't. I tell you
Right,
right now, because they will quickly might see me as the criminal or whatever
exactly,
I'm calling them. Absolutely not. I don't feel
exactly.
comfortable. I'll tell you
So
straight up.
right. So I would say that I think it's safe to assume that white people are quicker to pick up the phone to call the police than, let's say, a black person, because they know that historically and to this present day that they're usually presumed to at least be a suspicious person.
Hmm.
Um, and as you, and again, this is me like shooting off the top of my head, but in the era of cell phones and the continual racial divide, if you call 911 and you're not 100% sure, but whatever, for whatever reason she did what she did, she had to put on a show because things are different now. They're not just going to take your word, period. You gotta give them something to back up their actions. So you got to sound scared on the phone.
Right. And she
Even if you're
used that.
not scared, you got to sound scared. It doesn't have to be genuine. You got to sound it. That's so. I don't know about medically if there's stuff that people do with their voice. I to the point, but whether it's man or woman, if you call the police, you got to sound like there's a sense of urgency because it's a little bit different than it used to be.
Let's bring up that cell phone again, though.
Yes,
What if he would not have had that cell phone to record that?
He would have been in trouble, probably.
probably. Does it? Yeah,
So sad.
of course it is. But then you have, there are other cops that see the cell phones and don't care because they think what they're doing is right.
Right.
And where does that come from? I can't. I don't know if anybody can speak on that other than ignorance and hatred.
Right. So what I'll do I want to do a quick shift, and we'll start winding down here quickly. But I think I would be not doing the service. And again, Mr. Lance Adams had an emergency and everything, so he had to go. But you still have a few more minutes, Dr. Hill. I see you walking through that pretty house.
Yeah. I have to get my phone charger. We've been on here long.
Right. Okay, cool. But I want to also talk a little bit about, and I think that's got to be fair. I'll say real talk. It's not all about white people, right? This is not all about just black people. Both sides have responsibility. So I want to talk a little bit about our responsibility. All right, maybe your thoughts on that as well. There seems to be in some areas, like we see the rioting going on. There's a group in there who've been self-destructive. There are also some people, and I say this all the time: they smoke too much, they drink too much, right? They do certain things with their attitudes or whatever that are self-destructive. It is a fact, right? And a lot of it might stem from slavery and other things, but at some point, as African Americans, we have to be able to move forward. We have to be able to find the silver lining, and to be able to move forward and be the very best that we can be, even in the face of tough times and all of that. A lot of people have risen from poverty to riches not only in money, but in education and just, being good people, right? And all. And so that can no longer be an excuse, right? Even though we know that some of these things are systemic, and we certainly get that. So I want to talk about the fact that some communities and some people are destructive in our communities. From the white perspective, though, who wants to take on? Do you see some of the things that are going on in our communities as destructive?
Well, I'm a pediatrician by day, right? not
Yes.
always a ringside doctor. So of course I see a lot of things, and in my opinion, it always starts with children. And I am going to say, from a pediatric perspective, two parents is really good to have. Two parents are really good to have, and an absent father is a big problem in raising kids. And I see it over and over in the African American community.
Mm.
And I think, and it sets a foundation for children who don't learn responsibility, um, and who don't get things that they needed as children to grow up and be confident. And that's the biggest, that's where I see problems starting a lot. I see a lot of grandparents having to raise their grandchildren because both parents disappear, and this is much more prevalent in the African American community than in the white community. And I think that that it sets children up to be less successful in life.
Yeah.
And and that's, yes, that's, if I had to say to the African American community, there's something you're doing wrong, I would say you need to use more condoms and have kids when you mean to have kids,
Right.
and
Right.
both parents plan on raising it as
I
much as
think that one of
possible.
the key things you said there was about both parents, having two parents. I have always said, I think that perhaps we might break up too fast. When you have a responsibility to have a child, you should be responsible in taking care of that child. I'm going to actually be having a show about that in a few weeks about fatherhood as we move closer to Father's Day. Again, we talk about everything on this show. So I'm going to have some fathers on there and we're going to be talking about that. But I take your point, and I think it's very real. I just want to make a quick news point. Somebody just posted that they just arrested.
I
Uh,
just saw that. I can't confirm it though.
yeah, they just arrested
Yeah.
the man who had the knee on the neck, and I'm sure that's because I was the only one that said that yesterday on the live feed. No,
They
that's not.
are crediting. They are crediting you with it right now. I see.
Oh, did you do that? Wow, that's amazing. Johnny Davis Live going international. But no, I just made that. What I was doing, I know I had nothing to do with it, but
No.
I did make a comment on yesterday. Listen, if you don't do anything else yet to the other cops, it is clear that the guy with the knee, right, should, if you fired him, that was egregious. You saw that it was egregious. He should at least be in jail. There's no way he should be walking out. Why give him a chance to do something crazy like take his own life or whatever the case might be, or do something really crazy? So Anthony Wimberly, thanks for the update on that. We certainly do appreciate that. And all. I think that is some really good information. But doctor, as well, when we talk about self-destruction, the COVID-19 has really attacked the African American community, right? And I
Yeah.
think it's important that, we had a show on that actually, and you guys could go and check that out. But a lot of that's because not taking care of yourself, not eating correctly, drinking too much, smoking too much, not doing the proper exercise. That's just not just African Americans. It's kind of poor people, I guess, too. It might have something to do with the economics of things. I get it, but you also have a mind, you have a brain, right? Certain things that are going to kill you. I think there should be some level of responsibility in that, because the COVID has definitely taken advantage, if you will, of people with the underlying medical conditions, and that has been extremely. So we have a responsibility to eat better, to work out, to exercise, and to stay healthy, and so that is kind of self-destructive as well. And so I certainly want to say that. Now, I want to move on from that. I'm not going to go a lot, but I want to go into another thing, because all of this is coming around to how others see us. And I got a big point here in the end. Using the N word. I want to talk about, listen, all of these are shows within itself, right? But right now, I'm in the African American part, right? Where we're talking about our responsibility. I hate the N word, right? I hate that word. I wrote an essay about it, and I really did not say a lot about my past as far as my education and how I become what I become, because I'm into Muay Thai and kickboxing. That's what I do. That's my living, right? But I was sort of an activist. I used to write a lot of essays for newspapers and things like that. That's a whole nother story, right? So, but one of the articles I wrote was an article about the N word, and all of this again is about the mindset. We use the word, and it's so destructive, it's so negative, but we say, if you use that word, it means something else, right? What are your thoughts about the N word, Mr. Kearney?
I think what you said is fair. We talked about this privately. how how the black community uses that word is a conversation for the black community to have.
Right.
My opinion on it is irrelevant. In my opinion, the white opinion is irrelevant.
Mm-hmm.
That's you have a feeling on it. I have friends. I talked to somebody yesterday who said he's really trying to eliminate it from his vocabulary.
Right.
Because his views have changed on it as well. He's 60 now, and I met him when he was in his late 30s. So his view has changed. But I think that's a conversation for the black community to continue having, not for a white person to weigh in on and try to draw some false equivalency that
Yeah.
happens in our community. There's nothing good that can come out of that part. I think the ignorant part of what that word means and how, and I mean, we all know where it came from. But listen, there are people, I know people who would say that it doesn't bother them if they hear it out of a white person's mouth.
Right.
You know, that's if that doesn't bother them, that's fine. I'm still not going to say it. So again, I think it's something that has to be dealt with in the black community. If it's used as a loving term between two people, I can't speak to that.
Let me
I
just
can't speak to that. I
let, let,
can't speak to that because
let
I'm
me
like
just
you.
speak. No, look, you just hit my button, right?
Oh, I ain't hitting your button. I'm just
I think
saying that
that is
my
a bunch of
opinion shouldn't
crap.
matter.
That is
My
right. That's a
opinion
bunch of
shouldn't
crap.
matter.
That is not a word of the term of endearment, right? Somebody's tried to make that word a term. I don't care what, and I don't care.
I
You don't have
understand
to
what you're
like
saying.
me. People don't have to like me anymore, right? That is not a term of endearment, right? It was a term to despise you, to make you feel less than, right? And so you trying to change the dictionary and trying to change the true meaning of what the word is? That makes no sense. So I don't agree with that. I think it needs to be wiped out of the vocabulary, but not just say white people can't use it. Black people should not be using that word as well. And I see Rusney Luckett comes on and says she can't stand that word, right? And she doesn't use it, right? And which is really, really important. So I will not allow this excuse for people to use. I don't care what, and I hear people of all levels of the profession. There could be doctors and all, and they'll use the N word, and they'll say, "Hey, you nigga, this and that." And let me tell you, it's unacceptable to me. Unacceptable to me to use that word, and it's more unacceptable for you to use it and then try to tell somebody else you can't use it because of the color of your skin. Well, you're giving them a license to use it. If you want to begin to change things, wipe the word out of your vocabulary. Start with yourselves. Right? Wipe that word out of your vocabulary. I had to do it. I was raised on the word. I was called the word. I used the word. I called other people that word. But when I became more educated about my culture, my history, and the pride in myself, that what that word, understanding what that word meant, I just threw it out. That was it. It was done. It's no longer a part of my vocabulary in the sense of calling someone that, and certainly calling myself that. So we need to stand up, right, and do the right thing and wipe that word out of our vocabulary, and certainly not accuse white people of being racist when they use, even though they might be, right? But you're racist too when you're using it. If you want to get technical, a black person saying the N word has a racist tendency as well, and that's not cool. And I also don't like the words white trash and all of that. I don't like those redneck. I hate the word redneck. I don't like that. We got to be fair here. You can't say don't call me this and all, but then you call them that, right? This is a fact, right? And so this is what I want to help those people who've never heard me speak before and talk about these things. I want to say this on live on Facebook, that let's balance this thing out. Wipe out the word nigger, wipe out the word redneck, because all those are just the derogatory, right? And we don't need those words in our society. Okay, as we move right along, right, we know that there's a lot of guns in our community and things like that, and those are another area that we need to clean up. And I say that it's okay to have the gun if you're trained with the gun, right? If you're trained with the weapon, it's okay to have it. But there's a lot of killing going on, and it's because of people, I believe, do not understand how to use those weapons. That was another show. We've already done a show on that, and we'll do that again maybe another time. Now, as we begin to close out, my final thing is this to the African American community. Again, the cell phones. Here is the negative about the cell phone. This is where I'm closing. So, one of the hottest things on social media, you know what that is our community filming fights, not professional fights, street fights. Guys, it makes us look like animals. So you are sending out this impression to people in this little tunnel vision view of the camera that that's who we are. So the cell phone on one side has been that great liberator, but on the other side, it is showing ignorance. And what I'm asking the African American community to do is stop filming crap. Stop putting that out there because you have people like these two guests here today who, if you've listened to their stories, they are good people. They've had hang-ups and they fixed them, if you will. They're not perfect, neither am I. But I will guarantee you, and I'm going to let them, say something on this about when you see some crap like that on a film. Dr. Hill, take this one on first, and then you, Dr. Kearney. What are your thoughts on that?
Doctor, thank you.
Okay, you're
When I see street fights on film, I don't really see the color posting it. I'm sorry, I just think they're lousy fighters who think they're better than they are.
Yeah, that's because you're in the
I just
professional
look at it
world
from
of
a fight
sport.
perspective,
Right.
not color. So,
Yeah.
they think there's some badass out on the street getting in a fight, and I just think get in the ring, get in the cage, and see what you got. I don't, I don't see the color in it. I see white people doing it too.
Right, yeah, but
Videos like that.
maybe I'm in the wrong social media, but I see us doing it, right? What do you see?
I'm a fight snob, right, Johnny? I'm a fight
Right,
snob.
right. Mr. Kearney, what do you see, sir?
I see what you see. I'll play devil's advocate for a second. I have no idea why it's done, but everybody's looking for their 15 minutes.
Right, that's why it's done.
So, you want to get super cynical. A lot of it's in the inner cities, right? They're trying to climb their way out. Don't see much help. You get videoed, look like something, maybe their aspirations is they get noticed. No other way. They can't join a gym. Maybe they don't have the money to join a gym.
Right.
Not every community has that outreach that some of the other people that we all know kind of, do. I don't know what the reason is for. I think, yeah, you're right. They should stop filming crap and put it up there. Their reasoning behind it, I think, is multifaceted. Johnny, we lost you. But I think it is multifaceted. But it should stop. But I think everybody wants their 15 minutes of fame. That's part of social media. Where's our host?
Oh, there he is.
Yeah.
You missed everything I said. I said the most profound stuff you would have heard.
Oh my God! That's fine. Yeah, I don't know what happened there.
Crying.
No, I was just saying that it's a multifaceted problem. But some people want the 15 minutes of fame. Some people think maybe it's their way out. If they get discovered, they can't get into gyms and train the right way. I don't know. I don't know. But I think most of it is social media, and everybody wants to be on TV. And now you could be on TV or a phone or an iPad or a computer or anything.
Right. You got any thoughts on that, Dr. Hill, to close us out?
Do I have a comment?
Yes.
About the fighting or in
general? Oh, you already said it. You already.
I just wish this disease would go away. I wish we would figure out a way to cure this disease, because I think it affects everything in our world, and whether people realize it or not, it affects everything in America.
Right. Again, guys, you guys have been awesome today, and I really am just feel so good about you guys coming on today and speaking so frankly. And we've had a lot of people, I think they feel the same way. I think we need more dialogue. I just think we need more dialogue. I think we need to talk more. I think that we can do better than what we're doing. We need to root out the bad apples. There's no doubt about that. Whether it's in law enforcement. What I think every individual need to do a little introspect, right? And just find out what about someone else or a group or whatever that they don't like or they have been taught. Maybe take another look, right, at yourself and all. And I think that we can bring about change in this society. And I hope this show can just play just a little role in it. And you know what? This is going to be uploaded to my YouTube channel. So now we all the millions of views. You guys again, you guys, we're going to see you as activists in this movement to make this world a better place. Okay, guys.
Thanks, Johnny.
Thanks so
Thanks,
much for coming
thanks,
on today. I
Johnny.
appreciate it. Thank you. I'll talk to you soon. All right, bye-bye.
Bye now.
Have
All
a
right.
good day.
You too. All right, ladies and gentlemen, there we have it there. We were speaking there, I tell you, with two great people, Dr. Hill and Mr. Jim Kearney. I'm going to call him Dr. Kearney now. I'll keep calling him Dr. Kearney. He's a smart guy. He has a lot of good information, and I really appreciate it. Again, guys, I hope you guys will take what we've said today to heart. A lot of people were afraid of this show. They were afraid that it might be too much for people. I don't believe that. I don't think it was. I think hopefully it's going to be a big help to people as well. I'm okay with talking about anything. As long as we do it intelligently and respectfully, I think we can indeed talk about anything and try to move our society forward. Once again, guys, I want to thank everybody for watching Johnny Davis Live. We want to thank our sponsors again, Blackout Fight Gear, blackoutfights.com, and Eastern Offset Printing for all they do. Listen, I want you to always respect each other. Forward march. This is Johnny Davis Live, and I'm checking out. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.